There's good news, comrades. The NHS is delivering, and it's delivering more than ever before. Last week, the NHS delivered £9.6 million each to 5 GPs who sold their out-of-hours service to a private company called Care UK. The NHS is delivering quite nicely also for Care UK itself. Care UK has pocketed £160 million of public money in the lifetime of this Tory government, and it's just coincidence, of course, just coincidence that the directors of Care UK are major donors to the Conservative Party. We've got the NHS doing an excellent job on behalf of consultancy firms like McKinsey and Capita. These are the companies that are set to make a mint out of advising on how to privatise the NHS. And we've got the NHS also delivering absolutely brilliantly for Richard Branson. You have to ask yourself, how much money can one man possibly want? But we're in a scenario now where Virgin and Serco are effectively carving up England between them as they grab huge multi-million-pound NHS contracts. We've got Specsavers grabbing adult audiology services, and we've got Sainsbury's, God help us, taking over hospital pharmacies. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm quite happy to buy a loaf of bread or a can of cat food from Sainsbury's, but if I had cancer or renal failure or AIDS, then I want skilled NHS care, not a bloody supermarket. Is being carved up by the Tories, doled out to their big business pals, a hideous situation where you can see those sticky little old Etonian snouts in the trough, a complete feeding frenzy as the NHS gets dismembered. And at the same time, NHS cuts are reaching almost unthinkable levels. The Director of Policy and Finance at the Department of Health is predicting spending cuts of 40 to 50 billion pounds. That's over 40% of the NHS budget. Cuts on that scale mean an end to day-to-day NHS care, an end of a recognisable NHS. Those cuts for us mean illness, pain, disability and death. This is deliberate government policy, the destruction of the NHS, an absolute disgrace. So the question for us, and this is obviously the important one, the question for us is what's our side doing about it? And I don't know if this is just me, but I kind of sometimes fantasise. I want to turn the clock back, rewind history and see if we could do things a little bit better. And I want to turn the clock back not very far. I want to turn it back to November the 30th last year. Kevin quite rightly talked about the importance of November the 30th. Just remember that mass pension strike, the anger, the confidence, the spirit of resistance that Owen talked about. Those things were there. It was a brilliant, inspiring day. And I'll tell you what went wrong. Is our trade union leaders walked away from instead of walking away, the trade union leaders had taken that fight forward, then by now we would have the Tories on the run. And I want to turn the clock back as well to the 19th of December last year. That was 2.5 weeks after the biggest strike in British history. And I was off work on December the 19th, and I watched the news coverage of the pensions talks over and over and over again. And I remember my absolute disgust at the betrayal and the sellout that was orchestrated by Brendan Barber and Dave Prentice. And it needs to It was a sellout. And I watched the news and I saw Mark Sawalka, to his absolute credit, Mark Sawatka come out of those talks saying to the media, this fight goes on, we demand justice for public sector workers, but Mark stood alone. And as I watched, I thought, where's my General Secretary? For God's sake, where's Len McCluskey? Why isn't Len standing there shoulder to shoulder with Mark Sawatka? Why isn't Len backing up his own members in the public sector? And I'll tell you what was happening was Len McCluskey was sitting on the fence, and Len went on sitting on the fence for month after month after month, while the confidence of our side went down and the confidence of the Tories went up. Absolutely catastrophic. And this is what we saw writ large across our movement then, and to a significant extent, this is what we are still seeing in our movement. Kevin quite rightly talks about the lack of confidence now, but what we are also seeing is a lack of leadership, and it's the lack of leadership that feeds so directly into the lack of confidence. We've got the biggest assault on our class in 6 decades. We've got the attacks now on our living standards, on employment rights, on the welfare state, on our NHS, and in response to those attacks, the TUC dithers, talks about a general strike. Absolutely fantastic. But I'll tell you what, lads, if you want a general strike, then get on and organise it, because there's never been a war. And this is important. If they don't, if our leaders won't fight, what then? And this is what we need to start grappling with. And of course we can't let trade union leaders off the hook. Of course we have to go on demanding that they give a lead. But when they don't, we can't afford to do nothing. We can't afford to be paralysed by that. And I want to return just briefly to the health service, because we can see just the beginnings of something quite important. In Yorkshire, on the 1st of November, hundreds of admin and clerical workers in 3 hospitals in Yorkshire went on strike against pay cuts. Very solid strike. They're going forward to 3 days of strike action. Next week, I hope we can send a message of support from this conference to that strike. In a union where the leadership at the top is quite clearly not there. In South London, Lewisham Hospital at the moment is under threat. The Accident and Emergency Department set to close down as the first step in that hospital being run down. A brilliant district general hospital. It's actually the hospital where my dad was cared for at the end of his life, and his care was absolutely superb. Now, Lewisham, in the last 2.5 weeks, we've seen a meeting of 400 hospital workers, followed by a public meeting of 800 people, hospital workers and the community coming together, the potential there for each side to build the confidence of the other. An action committee last week of 100 hospital workers, a demonstration plan for the 24th of November that will be absolutely massive. This is superb. This shows what's possible. It shows that we can build a very, very powerful fight back. There are other examples. I care passionately about the NHS because it's obscene that this government wants to create a society where rich people can buy life and poor people are left to die. But it's also obscene, all of the other attacks, that we're paying for an economic crisis that we've not caused, that working class people are being thrown out of our homes, child poverty being created as a deliberate act of government policy. All of these things, an obscenity, generalised attacks on us, a class war against us carried out by the ruling class. Now I think Yorkshire and Lewisham show what we can do. You know, we can't wait for something to happen. We can't wait for other people to give a lead. We have to organise. We have to build networks of fighters. We have to start to create victories. It's possible. We have to make sure it happens.